Start recording. And great afternoon. My name is Erica Payton Foh, and I am a research fellow with the Center for Housing and Community Studies. I'm also an assistant professor in the Department of Public Health Education here at UNCG, and I'm a proud member of our local university and community partnership, Voices for Reproductive Justice. Today, I am happy to facilitate what I know will be an invigorating and thought-provoking discussion on housing and reproductive justice. For today's Housing Hangout, we have 5 presenters who will share their knowledge on the topic. Christina Young, Laura Vale, Love Oditola, Natasha Nikokeza, and Brianna Grant and her colleagues. Each of our guest speakers will give a brief presentation related to today's topic. After everyone has presented, we'll then shift to our discussion and Q&A time. And at that time, please feel free to unmute yourselves to ask questions, and you can also use the chat feature in Zoom.
I tell you, it doesn't matter, drink it, or I won't have neither one of y'all nothing.
And so as a reminder, as you're coming in, just keep yourselves muted so we can make sure we can hear our guest presenters. And then when we have our Q&A time, we can unmute ourselves and get the conversation going. So now to get us started, I would like to introduce our first presenter, Christina Young. Christina Young is a community health and social justice advocate and organizer. She has served as a health educator, a community-based research project manager, or a consultant about these experiences for a combination of 17 years to date, although she doesn't look over the age of 21. She is a member of the Greensboro Health Disparities Collaborative, which focuses on racial equity research and making healthcare system improvements. Currently, she is an assistant professor in the Department of Public Health Education at UNCG and the Director of Undergraduate Studies. She is also the co-chair of the Voices for Reproductive Justice webinar series and conference planning committee, which is a community university partnership project awarded to UNCG's Department of Public Health Education. Through this team, she helps to raise awareness about reproductive justice and ways to integrate public health education into social justice and activism, while also harnessing the voices of community partners for institutional change. Christina is also a proud mother of 2 daughters. Christina, thank you for opening up today's conversation, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Payton Foh, for this opportunity. And I'm glad to be here this afternoon to share with you all about our work. I want to ask for privilege to share my screen, if I can get that privilege, please. But to open up a little bit more on a personal story level, I got into the reproductive justice movement based on my identity as a Black woman, as a mother, and thinking about the intersections of the previous work that I've done in structural racism in cancer care, and then how the effects of structural racism work on the mother as well and the birth experience. And so a friend of mine introduced me to this movement, and I fully got into it and decided that I wanted to do more about it. And so I will share with you some more about that. Thank you for those privileges. Okay, can you all see my screen here? Okay, all right. So yes, so I am proud, and I see my co-chair is here, Dr. Amanda Tanner, a co-chair of the Voices Reproductive Justice Conference Planning Committee. So to give you a little bit background about the history of the movement, it started with 12 Black women, and I'm going to play a short part of the video. If that will play for me. It may not play, but that's fine, okay. Oh, here we go. We'll just play 2 minutes.
Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really glad for your interest in reproductive justice. This was a framework that was created by 12 Black women in 1994, June of 1994. And we did it for 2 reasons. Hillary Clinton, who was then the First Lady, was in the process of doing healthcare reform. And the centrist Democrats at the time thought that if they omitted reproductive health care from their proposal, that they could slide it by the recalcitrant Republicans. We 12 Black women saw this and had our WTF moment, like, reproductive health care is the main reason women go to doctors. So how can we be supportive of a male-centric revision of healthcare? We just can't. And so we were also coming from different organizations, but we were both pro-choice and pro-life. Some of us were pro-choice, some of us were pro-life. So abortion wasn't our glue. It wasn't the issue that we came together on. It was really about reforming this proposed policy. And in our negotiations that evening, we decided to splice together the concept of reproductive rights with social justice, because we believe that everybody needs social justice and the human right to have their needs taken care of. And we created the concept of reproductive justice that portmanteau that helped what we were talking about. And so, much to our surprise, that creation that we did in 1994 went viral. Within 10 years, most women of color were using reproductive justice as a human rights-based way to talk about what they needed from healthcare. And then within 20 years, it had penetrated the mainstream, so that the major organizations like Planned Parenthood, NARAL, now the Feminist Majority, were now rebranding themselves as reproductive justice sympathetic or actual reproductive justice organization.
Okay, and so I just wanted to share that brief part of the history with Dr. Loretta Ross, because she was one of the 12 Black women who coined the term of reproductive justice. And going along with that, I again got into this because of some of my experiences as a mother. I had gestational diabetes with my first child, and it was because of prenatal visits that helped me to make sure, because I was scared. I was worried about birthing my child at a low birth weight. I was scared about not a full-term pregnancy. I was also scared about infant mortality. And so it wasn't really until my daughter was 1 year old that I really celebrated she's living in here. And it's so scary to think about that because of the data that as an educated Black woman, my risk for infant mortality, or my child's risk for infant mortality, is higher than a white woman with a high school diploma. And so I was concerned and alarmed about it. And I'm thankful for all of the work of people in the reproductive justice movement to make sure that there is space and education going forward about the importance of prenatal visits and the importance surrounding safe and sustainable childhood for children. So going on, so in 1994, again, as a review, this was started based on healthcare reform and political advocacy. And so this it's kind of blurry to see, but this was the article that was published in the Washington Post. It had 800 signatures on it saying that you must not take out reproductive health from healthcare reform. And so, and this is what birthed the movement. And so SisterSong, I think 4 years later, she goes on to say in that video, was developed as an organization. And so they formally defined reproductive justice as the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy. So that is the right to have children or to not have children and to have those rights protected, and to parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And so some of the data that I was talking about, that regardless of the income or education level, childbirth for Black women is more dangerous than it is for white women. And this is a very scary statistic. So the Centers for Disease Control explains that a pregnancy-related death, that means for the mother to pass away, could be during pregnancy or within the 1 year at the end of pregnancy from either pregnancy complications or a chain of events aggravated by the pregnancy or related conditions. So it could even incorporate homicide to some women in very risky domestic violence situations within their first year. So it's a comprehensive statistical data point. So mortality rates for women over the age of 30, pregnancy-related mortality rates for Black women and American Indian and Alaska Native women is 4 to 5 times higher than it is for white women. Scary. The pregnancy-related mortality rate for Black women with at least a college degree is 5.2 times that of their white counterparts. This is current statistics. So the causes of these inequities in these disparities is rooted in racism, okay? Structural racism in healthcare and social service delivery means that African-American women are often to receive poor quality care than white women. Even when we have access, it's the quality of care that we receive that could put us at risk at the time of pregnancy and after. These stressors and the cumulative experience of racism and sexism, especially during these sensitive developmental periods, can trigger a chain of biological processes known as weathering upon our whole body, and it changes our DNA and the child as well. The long-term toll of this puts us at higher risk for many medical conditions and even lowers our immune system related to later in life being exposed to chronic diseases such as breast cancer and other forms of chronic diseases. But thinking about the pregnancy and the birthing experience, right then the stressors lead to health conditions called preeclampsia, that's high blood pressure, or embolisms, or even mental health conditions. So a team of us through our department at UNCG wanted to work on this, and there are several people who have been working on mortality health for a long time in our department. But what we thought about in this moment, UNCG had a year last year to celebrate women's rights to vote. And they put out a call to various departments to say, well, how does women's rights show up for you in your respective discipline? So for us in public health, there was a voice that came up at a faculty meeting and said, let's focus on reproductive justice. And so we got busy organizing. And so you see the list of names here of people that came to the table to say, we want to work on this. And part of the unique beauty of our group is that it's a community and university partnership. We recognize that it's not just among us as faculty members to come up with all the solutions. We couldn't. We definitely need to have community partners and to make sure that we are accountable to the group and the communities that we are wanting to serve. And so you see the names here. What we went forward to do was, since it was the COVID pandemic, we had to regroup what we're going to do. We're going to have a conference, an all-day conference, but instead we developed webinars so that we can continue to raise awareness. And so we had a webinar in the fall that focused on policy advocacy and political involvement. Also, that was during the election season, so it was timely. We had Senator Dom Davis to be a panelist, Aaliyah Belk as a young activist and alum of our program, and then Dr. Meredith Gringle as a faculty member who worked on maternal health research to talk and to share, like, how can we change policy? And so that was organized by a group of honor students. And then in the spring, just recently, we had another webinar, and this one focused on how do you use art-based activism. This one was held during Black Maternal Health Week. And so we had a panel of people who represented various forms of art-based activism, dance and painting and poetry. And then we also had a testimonial from a mother who had recently experienced a hardship through her birthing experience. And so our webinars are available on our department's webpage. This is a picture of some of the faces that you saw or will see in the fall webinar. And this is the group of our honor students, because part of the organizing of this effort is to bring students into opportunities of leadership as well in this movement, because one of the things that I've learned from listening to Dr. Loretta Ross is the importance of building your base, building your capacity, and bringing people into opportunities for leadership. And our last webinar, this is the group of students also who worked with us on the project, as well as the panelists. And so it's very powerful to sit and have a conversation, and dialogue is where we can start to push the needle towards what can be done about these issues. So lastly, this is a recently released blueprint for sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice that was released by SisterSong. We are intending to have a day-long conference next spring 2022. And we will have panels and breakout rooms and keynote speakers that will help us to figure out together, what can we do locally? What can we do in research? How can we change policy? How can students get involved around these principles? So principle 1, ensuring sexual and reproductive health care is accessible to all people, all birthing people. 2, ensuring discriminatory barriers in healthcare are eliminated. 3, ensuring that research and innovation advance sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice now and in the future. 4, ensuring health, rights, justice, and wellness for all communities. And 5, ensuring that judges and executive officials advance sexual and reproductive health, rights, and justice. So I just wanted to thank our planning team again. We're ongoing, and I hope that you will stay attuned to our next steps and maybe come to our conference. So those are my remarks to share. And thank you for letting me open up with that.
Thank you so much, Christina, for really, setting the tone, giving us a definition of reproductive justice that we can be mindful of as we, listen to the rest of our presentations, and as we get to our discussion point of today's session, as well as providing for us key moments in the movement for reproductive justice. So thank you again so much. And now I'm going to present our next presenter, Laura Vale. Laura Vale, you also have the permission now to share your screen if you would like to. But Laura Vale serves as Cone Health's System-Wide Director of Population Health Equity. In this role, Laura leads health equity strategies that addresses social influences on people's health. As part of this work, Laura oversees interpreter services, transportation services, food security, community engagement and partnerships, and a closed loop referral platform which connects people to needed resources in the community. Laura is a partner to the clinical health equity work that focuses on internal quality improvement to bring about equitable health outcomes. Laura has led many of Cone Health's efforts to become a national leader in health equity, including Cone's health leader status on the Health Equity Index for its LGBTQ care and the American Hospital Association's Caroline Boone's Lewis Equity of Care Award in 2020. Prior to joining healthcare, she taught Latin and English in public and private schools in Guilford County. She holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Latin from Agnes Scott College and is currently pursuing a Master's of Arts in Intercultural Studies through Asbury's Theological Seminary. And she is also a member of Greensboro Health Disparities Collaborative and the Health Equity Collective in Alamance County. Laura, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Dr. Foh, and thank you, Christina. I appreciated that presentation so much, and I want to lift up a couple things that you said. I so appreciated that. So Christina and I are connected through Greensboro Health Disparities Collaborative, and in her bio, one of the things that I heard Dr. Foh say was that she is lifting community voice for institutional change. And I'm sorry, Christina, if I paraphrased that wrong, but I think I got the essence of it, right? Really lifting up community voice for institutional change. And so we've been connected through some of that institutional change. I think I need to do one more thing here, don't I? So that you're not seeing all my slides. Okay, you might have to see all my slides because I'm not so tech savvy. Oh, at the bottom, yes. Ah, that might be better. Okay, all right. So I appreciate Christina, I appreciate her and her passion around this reproductive justice and really actionable items. And I look forward to the ways that the blueprint, right, and the committee that's working on that, the way that we might intersect as a health system. So, yeah, this presentation is about the intersection of reproductive justice, housing, and health, or health equity. And so I think about, Christina, put the definition up there for us about this bodily autonomy to parent in safe communities, safe and sustainable communities. So I think how, this is a lot about possibility, because I don't think this exists everywhere, right? And I don't think it exists fully in our community. And so I think this is a lot about what's possible and what we can do together. So, so for just a minute, or just a couple seconds, really, I just want you to look at this picture, look at this child, and maybe put in the chat what you think, feel, see. Like, let this penetrate you for just a few seconds. Thanks for those of you, and I'm going to pull the chat here. I see the word hope, beautiful child, the future, and there might be a couple others I missed. But thank you for putting that in, and for just allowing me to keep this really human, right? So this is about people, and a lot of times I think we get lost in the data. And just want to keep this really human and about what's possible for our community when institutions like educational systems and health systems come together, and when there's advocacy. So leveraging platforms like this Hangout to build advocacy. All right, so let's see if I can, okay. So keeping it human, I wanted to talk about an experience I had, kind of how this maybe became such a conviction for me, and a shared passion with Christina around this. But how this became such a conviction for me was a few years ago, I was invited to attend a support group. It was a breastfeeding support group. And these were all African-American moms that were there. And to say it was life-changing, I think it sounds trite, but it really was life-changing for me to sit down and ask people and really listen. What was your birth experience like? And these women, most of them had birthed their babies at Cone Health, but not all of them. But there was something really universal about these birthing experiences that was disheartening. It was tragic. It was sad. And to kind of be able to hear them give voice to these racialized birthing experiences. Some of the things they said to me was, my doctor couldn't hear me. I think my doctor can't hear me because I'm an African-American woman. About my own body, when I'm talking about my own body, is what that particular woman said. And then, so, there are things in the clinical world that every patient gets asked, like about their drug history, but these women really gave voice to that. It felt like an accusation, and that they didn't like slang terms like baby daddy. And this particular mom said, I've been married to this man for 6 years, right? He's not the baby daddy. So really, like, and fear. One mom said she asked her mom to come and stay with her other children when she went, because she said, I really didn't know if one of us, the baby or myself, if one of us might not make it through. So these are real fears. And so what I heard in all of that, right, is there's a need for safety, a need for security, a need for resources and advocacy. People need to be heard and respected by their healthcare providers. And so that's part of the reproductive justice that propels me into this conversation about housing. And I will say, like, there has been some response to some of this. And one of the simplest things was to go back to the clinical team and say, if we really ask everyone this drug question, then why don't we preface the question with that? This is an awkward question. This is uncomfortable for me to ask, and it may be uncomfortable for you to answer, but we ask all our patients this just for the purpose of history. And so when you give context to something, you humanize what you're doing. You acknowledge that this is a human being sitting across the clipboard, sitting across the computer. Now everything's on Epic. You know, but you acknowledge that this is a human question that's really hard, that is really important for medical treatment. And so, that, and then dropping the slang, that was one of the first things we were able to do. And I, you know, I could not guarantee that everybody, you know, does this perfectly, but it was really important for me to hear this and to understand the autonomy that women were seeking, that these African-American women who invited me into their breastfeeding support group, the autonomy they were seeking over their own bodies and the respect, right, in healthcare. So that, I would say, really, it was life-changing for me to spend a Saturday morning with them. So as I continued this work in health equity, of course, you all probably know one of the, all right, I'm seeing, sorry, Erica, I'm seeing that 2 people are in the waiting room. Do I have permission to give them entrance?
You can go ahead and present, and I'll admit them for you.
Okay, okay, all right, I wasn't sure. Okay, but you know, as those of us, I imagine all of you are familiar with the infant mortality rates, and I heard Christina highlight the maternal mortality rates, and we should be concerned about both as we are looking at health equity and really trying to decide if mothers and babies can thrive in our community, then in theory, all people should be able to thrive. And so when we have certain populations, like in this chart, we can see that African Americans and the Hispanic moms or, you know, are not thriving, right? So their babies are not thriving. So let's dig into that in terms of the reproductive justice, the real social justice part of that. So, so this would be a leading indicator that we have a community. We know that we don't have a community that's experiencing health equity based on these rates. So again, you know, keeping it really human here, like as I've spent more time with trying to understand the housing issues here, right? And we're going to pull this together in just a minute, the reproductive justice and the housing, but really pulling together what's the housing, what are neighborhoods, what are the concerns in neighborhoods, and so what I've learned from listening is that housing is health. And I know we have someone on here from Cottage Gardens and from the work there. And and the environmental justice, I heard that referenced early in Stephen's remarks. And so I just want to say asthma is, you know, triggered. So we know that from our work in Cottage Grove. We know that landlords are not always responsive to repair needs. We know that the shortage of affordable housing makes people living in substandard housing units unlikely to complain to the landlord. And on a positive note, we know that there's some buy back the neighborhood work going on, some real pride of historically African-American neighborhoods where there are initiatives to buy back the neighborhood and to take these neighborhoods where there's been disinvestment and really begin to look at how we frame those neighborhoods in terms of their assets. And then I've learned a lot about gentrification, listening and just being a part of different housing webinars and things for our area. It's just that people do want clean and safe sustainable housing, and I heard Christina mention that, like parent and safe and sustainable communities. People want that, and they also want the autonomy of deciding what that neighborhood looks like, and being asked before people from the outside with their great ideas come in and gentrify neighborhoods. So kind of pulling those two threads together, right? The reproductive justice and what I've learned about housing. So I'm not an official researcher like those of you at UNCG that I admire so much. And I love to participate in things where research is being presented. And so I was exposed to a case study that was from Atlanta, and it was a step-down housing intervention for low income, primarily these were women of color and families of color that were in this study. And the partner for this was HUD. And so I was so excited by this presentation. I was like, oh, this really changes the infant mortality rate. And this is what it takes, until we got to the end of the presentation and they said, yeah, and it didn't really work because HUD wasn't the right partner because of constraints like they couldn't qualify for these housing interventions if they were in arrears for utilities, or, and sometimes they were finding out that because a single parent was in arrears, she was then putting the utility in the name of the child. And so by the time the child became 21, the child already had credit that didn't allow them to get these housing subsidies. It was heartbreaking, right? So I thought at first, I thought, this is it. This is the road, you know, the roadmap for us. But it wasn't. And there were some, so again, the advocacy, like really understanding where it is that we can intervene and advocate. So Christina, I loved that you brought up the policy advocacy, organizing, and research when you were highlighting that webinar that you did last fall, because I think that's so much of it is we need to understand the space, where the space is that we need to stand to remove some of this. So how could HUD have been a better partner for them? So then another case study that I was exposed to that I really loved was a case study out of Columbus, Ohio. And they, again, did rental subsidies as part of this. And it was ongoing after childbirth. And it was kind of a step down, like you received a certain amount in year 1 and then a certain amount in year 2, kind of, you know, trying to move to this self-sufficiency mindset. The great thing about this one was people were enrolled in these wraparound services for care management. So, and again, the whole goal was to decrease the infant mortality rate. So that one was pretty successful. It was a pretty small study. I think it was 100 moms and families. And so about that time, I came to Stephen Sills, I came to Dr. Sills, and I said, okay, I have a big idea. And I like laid it all out, like maybe Cone Health can buy an apartment complex and we can screen for housing insecurity, all this. So, and we can house. And so he said he said, that's a wonderful idea. And you're breaking about 4 laws. So again, like, you know, like there are, so Fair Housing Act and all of these things are set in place to help, but there are times that what's set in place doesn't help us to do the right thing. Like we can see what might, you know, we can look at these case studies and pull the best of all of them, and we can see what's possible, but sometimes we run up against a barrier like what falls within litigation that's already in place. So our legal system. So this is one I would encourage you, since you are in this housing hangout, I would encourage you to go and read this one. It's in Health Affairs from April 2020. So just last year, and it was about medically complex families. So this was not totally narrowed in on reproductive justice, but I thought the possibilities really for this were exciting to me. It explored some health and housing interventions. Of course, it's about just improving. It was a number of different metrics, right? A number of different health metrics. But they actually, so their innovation that I loved on this one was they gave housing prescriptions that included the coordinated care for social needs. So I thought there's something there that between my research colleagues at UNCG and Cone Health, I think there's something there that we might still explore together. And I thought one thing that came out of this study that was really beautiful was it did help the children, and it really did. And this one talks a lot about that weathering, Christina, that you just mentioned, that toxic stress, right? And so part of what came out of this one is that it improved the parental anxiety and depression. So all the stress and the weathering, the things that keep us from being able to, to address it in a holistic. This one was so much more holistic. So, so anyway, I thought that was one. I just recommend that to you all to jump on Health Affairs and find that one. And then I just wanted to share a little bit of data from that's local, that's right here. This comes from United Way and a presentation that they gave during COVID. I want to say it was last summer, maybe that I saw this one. But I just want you to see this is, I like this because it's visual. I'm going to show it to you in a table form in just a second, but the bar graph makes it really clear that what is a living wage in Greensboro? What is a living wage? So Cone Health has moved to $15 an hour, trying to address the living wage. But when I saw this, I thought, well, that's a living wage if you're single, right? If you're one person, that's a living wage. But as you go across this, you can see, and it would be a living wage for 2 adults, at the end. But the $15 an hour still falls short if you are a single parent with a preschooler, right? Or a single parent with a preschooler and a school-age child, you're even further behind. And so we know that the wealth gap and this self-sufficiency wage is connected to housing, and it's connected to the racism that we experience in our community. And so here it is in table form, and just I kind of put some thoughts over here on the left side, like, where can we start? Because these things are connected, right? Access to childcare, access to affordable childcare, access to, I heard Christina say quality, that sometimes there's access, but what you receive is not quality. And so really being able to lift up all of that. So I do think that a living wage is a part of this conversation when we talk about the intersection of reproductive justice and housing and health equity. I think the living wage is part of it. Employment opportunities, skill building, addressing the wealth gap, like really acknowledging and talking more seriously about reparations. What does that look like? We have the maps that show the redlining. What would it look like for us to be a leading community that goes back and addresses and redresses the redlining that occurred? And so I think addressing the wealth gap in real tangible ways, investing, reinvesting in the communities that I say we, it's community wide, right? That we disinvested in those communities. And so really looking at the shortage of affordable housing, getting creative with the city on that. And these are just my ideas. I feel like you guys are going to have some great ideas, so I'd love for you to throw them in the chat. What are your ideas? Where would we start when we try to say there are threads here that we're pulling together? Reproductive justice, we are talking about housing, and we are talking about health equity. And we know that our communities of color within our community are disproportionately disadvantaged in all of these systems. And so where do we start? Where do you think? So I'd love your thoughts in this, love to engage you just to interact for a second. We could do rental assistance, we could do some innovations like we're in some of these studies. We could do something like prescriptions. So I would love to see, I'm gonna pull up the chat here. All right, I see Christina's, these ideas are helpful, and I know that there are other ideas, others with ideas. So this just showed it in chart form. I think the chart's helpful because it breaks out housing and childcare and food and all of these expenses. So I have one more slide. And this is really just to leave you with possibility, to say that we've not solved this. I don't think it's really been solved anywhere in the country, but there are some best practices, things we can pick and choose and cherry pick, pull from. But what does it look like if we really take reproductive justice seriously in our community, and we really address the housing issues in our community? And I think we're going to hear a great presentation next about the Congolese community and some real activism that occurred there, which is important. But this is all I have for you, and I just want to thank you for. Okay, so I'm seeing something else in the chat here. Yeah. Yeah, I do think, Christina, I love that about, preschool. I wonder if that preschool age child wage includes the expense of childcare. To do a deeper dive with United Way on how they came up with those numbers, right? Like that would be really interesting. So I thank you for inviting me. I hope you'll reach out to me. I am at Cone Health, and this, the social needs and structural barriers, including racism as a social determinant of health, are the things that I'm most interested in and work on. So I hope that you'll reach out to me as you have ideas and ways that you see the health system could interact. And I thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Erica.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was an excellent presentation. I really appreciate you making the connections between reproductive justice, housing, and health equity. But what I really, really loved is, keeping it human, right? And so making sure that we acknowledged and you lifted up the voices of the Black women that you've interacted with, as well as addressing some of the barriers, or talking about the barriers that we have within the system, and acknowledging that there needs to be some system change to occur, but not leaving us with just gloom, but also opening the opportunity for what we can do, right, within the realm of this work. So thank you again for a fabulous presentation, and I look forward to us having more conversations during the Q&A. I'm getting ready to now present our next two presenters, Love and Natasha. So Love, I'm making you co-host so you'll be able to share your screen. And I will briefly give an introduction. So Love Odetola is a fourth-year PhD student in our department here at UNCG in public health education. As a maternal and child health professional, she works to improve the health of mothers and children from a holistic perspective. Currently, her research interests focus on household-level environmental exposures and maternal child health outcomes among vulnerable populations. Prior to the doctoral program, Love served as a consultant with the World Bank, recognizing that women are the backbone of climate-smart agricultural initiatives. I want to learn more about that. Natasha is the Senior Program Coordinator for the Community Centers at UNCG Center for New North Carolinians. The Community Center provides services to immigrant and refugee families, such as after-school tutoring for K-12 students, case management, and employment services for adults, English as a second language and citizenship, just to name a few. Natasha and her family came to the US in 2008 as refugees, and Natasha has been involved in the community since then, but has been at the Center for New North Carolinians since June 2017. And Natasha also holds a master's degree in law from Wake Forest University. Love and Natasha, we are eager to hear your presentation, and the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Dr. Payton. I'm so excited to be here. It looks like my internet is kind of spotty. Am I shaky? Okay,
You're doing good.
Awesome. And it was just so fun to see how Laura redirected us to just focusing on the people, right? All data is made of people. They're not just numbers that come out of the blues. They're specific individuals that comprise large databases and all these where best practices come from and all that. So I'm so grateful to be here. So my name is Love. I'm a doctoral student in the Department of Public Health Education. And before I proceed, Natasha, do you want to introduce yourself really quick as we start? I should probably set the timer for 15 minutes. Do you want to introduce yourself really quick as we start, maybe?
I am Natasha. I'm not like everything has been said about me, but I'm really glad to be able to present with you, Love. It's been a while since I worked with you, and I'm happy to be in this space. Thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Natasha. Yeah. So right when I started school here, my advisor, Dr. Sharon Morrison, plugged me right into the community, working with local refugee families, especially the local African refugee families. And so it's been a whole learning experience. Now for today, we are going to be, so the way this is going to go, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the case study that we're going to be looking at that occurred right here in Greensboro in 2018. It is an unfortunate case study. Out of it has come up some awesome efforts as far as addressing this issue of housing, which of course affects reproductive rights and reproductive justice. So I'll be presenting some basics of what happened and what, as a student, I've kind of looked into as far as that event occurred. And then I'll go on and ask some questions from Natasha. So it's kind of going to be a really brief Q&A type of thing, just to give the audience a good, a deeper dive into what occurred and how all of this may be related to reproductive justice. So if I move on to the next slide, 2018, summer 2018, that was my first year here. I was given some support from the department to look at maternity experiences among the local refugee community. That was the initial plan, right? That was the idea. And unfortunately, that's just a few weeks before we could even begin anything, a fire struck. And this was a fire that took the lives of 5 siblings, 5 refugee siblings, Congolese refugee siblings. You know, it's, when the title comes, of course, from one refugee camp to another, right? From what, that was actually one of the students working on the project came up with that, from one refugee camp to another, where the family, it's like, they came here with hope, right, of something amazing, hope for their children, and then having something worse happen to them that would have occurred in the refugee camp. It's more than heartbreaking. That's not even the right word. So when that occurred, there was no way I was going to go around asking about maternity experiences. The community had to heal. Other due diligence, other, how do I say it? There's just no way I could go around with the initial plan. And I actually had no interest in doing that at that point in time. So when this came about, even as we go into the details of what occurred, it's important that we keep in mind a life course perspective. Now, what do we mean about a life course perspective? When we think about how do early experiences shape a child's lifetime. So a lot of this was in Summit-Cohen, an apartment complex with several families. One family was affected by the fire. You have children in that complex that perhaps played with the 5 siblings overnight. Over 24 to 48 hours, their friends are gone. You know, they have to recover from that. You have pregnant women right in the complex who had to deal with all the aftermath of what happened with moving, and we'll talk a little bit about what happened afterwards. So it's important to think about yes, it is an event, but it's likely an event that might even have impact across the lifetime of those who are exposed to what happened at this apartment complex during the fire. So it's important. I mean, why would we even take a life course perspective? Was physical and social factors underlie most ethnic, as a typo there, ethnic and racial health disparities. And ultimately, kind of as what Laura was sharing, is to improve children's living conditions so as to reduce children and even families at large, so as to reduce health disparities and to improve health outcomes. So when this occurred, my advisor suggested that, okay, maybe we should look at take up a media analysis where we look at how does the media portray this issue? How do the media, what voices are heard, what exactly occurred, or from the media's perspective, right? To give the community time to heal and just for that whole process itself. So this page, when the event initially happened, especially within 3 to 6 months after the event, a lot of blame was going around. There's just a blame game. And eventually they said it was due to unattended cooking. And you imagine being told that, there's this quote right here. This is blocking my view a little bit. As a parent, I think the only worst thing than losing 5 children is to have it on the front page that it was your fault. So there was a lot of blame game going on. And you imagine the mother who just lost her 5 children. There's the father as well. The father was at home, the mother was at work, the 5 children were at home with the father. And the mother coming back to that over just within 24 to 48 hours. Let's see here. So just really kind of, before we go into some details here, a brief sense of what we saw in the articles. We looked at 57, we actually had 70 articles at large, but this that you see here was within the first 6 months of the event. Most of the articles were on the physical damage. So the voice of the family members, the voice of the community, especially within those first 3 months or so, first 3 to 6 months was kind of lost, unfortunately. The women themselves, the family, of course, family itself, the voices were lost in a sense. There was some emphasis on mental health, physical health, very little focus on solutions as far as what to do moving forward. Just some quotes here to share on the themes that came up. I'll probably read the second one here, resettlement into substandard housing. Because once refugees come to the US, they don't really have a choice as to where to stay, right? The housing is figured out before they get here, and there's limited funding on how much can even go around. Natasha is going to talk more about what all that entails. So one of the refugee members or members of the refugee community said, I felt like everything I was going through was because of the agencies that brought us here. And no one said, we're refugees from Africa. We want to know if we have rights here. So lack of knowledge on, the basic rights. The fire occurred in May. In June, attributed to unattended cooking. Supposedly in June, an advisory committee was formed. By the time August came around, the apartment complex was condemned, and the residents had about 30 days to evacuate. And this is a group of people who have high parity rates. What do we mean by that? Pregnancy rates are high, in a sense that even during that time, several of the women just within that apartment complex were expecting, were pregnant. So again, I'm going to let Natasha provide light on how to even shed some reproductive lens, or to look at this from a reproductive lens perspective more. And I just want to give a sense of how some of these, when we talk about housing insecurity here, because by the time the apartment complexes were condemned, by the time that happened, eviction, having to find a home, just the stress that goes with that. Previous research has shown, this was also reflected in the presentation by Laura, has shown that unfortunately preterm birth rates among women who are exposed to such housing insecurities and such stress, rates of preterm birth is significantly higher. You have higher rates of extended hospitalization. And when we talk about preterm birth, even just the economic implications with that, right? The cost of a preterm birth versus a regular birth, that's a normal birth, is steep compared to the cost of a preterm birth compared to a normal birth is steep. So think of we haven't talked about the emotional aspect. We haven't talked about the health outcomes as far as going through a preterm birth in itself. So these issues, just realizing that having to go through this whole situation here and thinking of how over the lifetime of the children who were exposed to this, these are the ones who survived in the neighboring apartments per se, what that might have, the stress that the families had to, the pregnant woman knowing that stress actually affects a developing child after birth as well. So realizing the impact across the lifetime and thinking of that from that perspective is really important. So now I'm actually going to go ahead and just ask some further questions, just to give us a better idea of what occurred here and how this relates to reproductive justice. All right, so Natasha, I mean, we've given a basic overview of what occurred. How were the needs of the women, the needs of the mothers, how were they addressed once in the months coming after this fire? How were the needs of the mothers addressed, and what happened within the community to fix or even to heal from this issue?
Thank you, love. I think before I answer that question, I wanted to really go back to what you mentioned about how everything is set before refugees come to this country, and how, they don't have any say because they, number one, like the money for rent and utilities is provided by the government. And so resettlement agencies are doing everything they can with the little they have to provide for these families and to set up apartments and all of that. So they have no say in where they end up living. Okay, so that is number one. Number two, I also wanted to touch on something that has been said, I think, by Laura and Christina, about the humanity of really everything that we are covering here today. So, my family and I came as refugees, and I am a mother of 3. So 2 were born in my country of origin and 1 was born here. So I got to experience, giving birth in my country of origin, where I was comfortable in my language, in the people who were around me, and then giving birth here, where you feel like everything is controlled by someone else and you really don't have a say. So at least for me, I was very fortunate to be able to speak English and to speak for myself. But really, Christina talked about, the percentage of Black people, Black women who are very scared and who die when they are giving birth. So add that to what Laura shared about people talking about not being heard by their doctors. So we are talking about people who speak English and they are not heard, but it's not a problem of language barrier. They are not being heard, but they are speaking English, So add a layer of people not speaking English and having to rely on interpreters who themselves do not have really, they're trying their best, but there are some technical terms that cannot be interpreted. So really, that mother is in the hand of God. Whatever happens at that time, really it's up in the air. So add to that the stress, add to that this community that had been here between a few months to 2 years, something like that, very devastating in their community happen, and all of a sudden they're told that they have to move. So really they are still mourning. This is the community that they have ever known in America. We are talking about childcare. These are the people that they rely on to be able to go to work and leave their kids with. And now they have to leave. And now they're told you have to be looking for a place to live when they are new. They were not part of looking at where they were going to live to begin with. And now they have to be looking for where they're going to live. And that also will come with additional funding, because they might be looking at a place where they will have to pay 200, 300 more than what they were paying currently at that place. So put everything together and think about this mother who's expecting, has no idea where she's going to live, and she might be due anytime while she's looking for a place, while she, might go into labor, and she does not have any support. She does not have anyone who's going to be watching her kids when she goes to the hospital and she doesn't know if she's going to make it. So I just said, I know that I just said a lot of things at once, but everything that was said earlier, add those layers of people being new to this country, not speaking English, the stress, losing 5 kids, losing the support, and really like being left at feeling like they are being punished for something that they didn't do. So like really it was devastating. I still cannot look at the pictures, Love, that you shared without feeling like, you know, that trauma that I experienced, because the Center for North Carolinians was there since day one until we were able to place everyone into affordable and safe. I can't even say that, but we were with everyone, and we're still connected with these families. And you know, it was just a very devastating situation. But one thing also that I can add to that, it was something that woke up the community here to say, what can we do? What can we do to avoid such a devastating situation to ever happen here in Greensboro? So we saw the community come together. That was a positive thing that came out of it. And I'm happy to say that there are a lot of families that are still connected to the families that they helped and supported and sponsored, because some families were not able to get an apartment that was $200, over the rent that they were paying there. So they had sponsors, and CNNC connected them to churches, to families that were able to continue to support the families and pay that extra money that they had to pay. So I'm happy to say that we saw the community come together and really work together to help these families. But it was a very unfortunate situation, and unfortunately, people are still living in those conditions that are unsafe, and thinking about giving birth in a situation like that. Like I said, I gave birth to my youngest here, and because that was new, everything was new. We had just moved into our first home that we bought at that time, and that stress only, it was a happy stress, but that stress only, got my blood pressure high. That was the very first time, this was my 3rd child, but I had my blood pressure high, and that took me into the hospital and ended up giving birth to my child, earlier than the expected time. So imagine the stress that these women were living, and thank God they gave birth safely, and all of the moms have their babies with them. It was happy moments when we were celebrating those births, but again, I can't even think about that period without,
Yeah. Thank you, Natasha, for those details. I think the one thing I'll say before handing back to Dr. Payton is just the emphasis on how the community came together, and realizing that was part of this, well, not solution, but at least starting to resolve some of the issues. It seems to me that was key, as far as folks who sponsored and even covered that break, that gap in rent, because they covered over for 6 months, for a year, and took over for, even if it was just a few months, as the families had to leave. So realizing how crucial the community was in addressing, or beginning to address some of these issues.
Absolutely, and the support, knowing that you were not alone in all of this, that support was really crucial in helping families cope with a situation that was just very devastating.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome, Dr. Payton, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Love and Natasha, for that presentation. And really sharing an event that was unjust, right? Unfortunate, and could have been avoided. So thank you for sharing that. And I hope that, we're starting to see ever more as with each presentation, this connection between housing, safe and affordable housing, and reproductive health, and why reproductive health and is needed, and why we need a reproductive justice movement to connect all those pieces together. We need a movement. It's called Reproductive Justice for a reason. And sharing the unfortunate story with the Congolese women is an exemplar, is an example for why justice is needed. So thank you again. Next, we are gonna have our final presenter with her colleagues. Deja, I'm giving you a co-host so you can share your screen. But let me introduce our next presenter, Miss Brianna. So Brianna Grant is a certified parent educator, a trained health coach, and a trained birth doula who oversees the development and implementation of the Teen Parent Mentor Program and the Adolescent Parenting Program at YWCA Greensboro. Brianna believes that pregnant and parenting adolescents deserve complete support during their journey. In addition to managing the Teen Parenting Program, she serves on several nonprofit boards and programs related to networks to make contributions that result to community support for the young parenting population. Some of her recent board and volunteer commitments are Community Advisory Board of the Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies Program of YWCA Greensboro, Guilford County Local Interagency Coordinating Council, Guilford County Coalition on Infant Mortality, and Nurse Family Partnership Community Advisory Board. Other volunteer commitments over the years include offering support services as a volunteer birth doula in Guilford County and serving as an advocate for maternal health. Brianna, you have our undivided attention and the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am, like Dr. Payton said, Brianna Grant. I appreciate you so much for your introduction and for the invite for us to represent our organization in this Housing Hangout series today. Deja, if you can go ahead and share the presentation, we can get started. While she's doing, I do want to say thank you to all the previous presenters. This presentation and this conversation has been incredibly insightful and touching thus far. So I'm excited for the conversation to follow.
Hi, Erica. Really quickly, would you mind granting me co-host privileges to the other Deja Dixon? I'm logged in here on my laptop and on my phone. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. So I myself, as Brianna Grant, I'm the Director of Teen Parenting Programs here. As Dr. Payton has shared, I am assisted with two colleagues today. One by the name of Angelica Mickle. She is our Parenting Programs Case Manager and Advocate. And we also have Deja Dixon. She is our Adolescent Parenting Program Coordinator. And they will be discussing and sharing some things today as we partner throughout this presentation. So what our talking points today will consist of is programs here at the YWCA, how we address reproductive health and reproductive justice issues, resources that we utilize in our programs, and preventative measures that we do through our work here at the YWCA of Greensboro. So I'm going to pass it along to Angelica and Deja to discuss a bit about the four main programs that we have here.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad to be here with you guys today. And I'm going to kick us off with one of our first programs, which is called Healthy Moms, Healthy Babies. This program's mainly criteria is for minority women, African American or Hispanic population. We like for age is not a limit. We typically enroll moms when they're pregnant or if their baby is 2 months old in their postpartum stage. We provide doula support with that program, and childbirth education as case management. And as we go up to the top left corner, we have the Teen Parent Mentor Program. This program is catered to 19 years and younger, and we follow the baby and mom until they are of age that we feel like they are meeting their goals and following what they want to do in life. And we provide peer support education as well.
Moving over a little bit to the adolescent parenting program, that's very similar to TPMP, but we focus a little bit more heavily on guiding moms through their schooling. Again, we are also 19 and under, and we don't have any other specific restrictions besides they must be parenting or pregnant when they enroll in the program, and they must be either planning on getting back into school if they've left for some reason or already in school. So we focus very heavily on that. We use the parent teachers curriculum to do so, and we definitely want to thoroughly encourage our moms to prevent subsequent pregnancies and try to push them towards self-sufficiency outside of school, of course, and along with their children. And then as we move down to the emergency family shelter, we also, in the shelter, we focus on goal setting. All of these things, by the way, are included in all of the programs. That's why it's a little circle. We all circulate, we all use these different methods in order to continue to provide that holistic kind of view, that holistic support to all of our families, all of our moms, all the people that are going through these programs at the YWCA. Sorry, tangent. But the shelter itself, again, focuses on providing that very, basic support at the levels of shelter, food, and then moving up to goal setting and goal achievement, and then eventually pushing families towards self-sufficiency, towards being able, to come out of homelessness. So, thank you.
Wonderful. So it's important to mention the reason why we are presenting the way that we are today. The programs that we have here at the YWCA, they serve different populations, but also the same. We work as a collective. Deja, go back, please. Thank you. We work as a collective. We have teen parenting programs, adult parenting programs, and we also have that emergency family shelter, housing families who are transitioning from housing, transitioning to safe housing. And so when I say we work as a collective, we literally work as a team. We do not work in silos because we understand it takes a huge network in order to address the populations that we serve and the struggles that they're going through. And so this question here, how do we address reproductive health? We do that by our case management and our advocacy on a day-to-day basis. This looks like providing individual support, informational support. It's highly key. We're providing informational support through our peer group education, and that includes maternal health education, adolescent health education. This is honing in on establishing a medical home, dental home, and a vision home as well, because those things are important when we're talking about holistic support. We're looking at the entire individual. We want to be sure that their whole person, physical, social, emotional, even spiritually, that is the well-being sense there, right? And so we also want to hone in on contraception methods, comprehensive sexual education, STD and STI information, and family planning resources. And so we address those things through our process that Angelica is going to share with you all today.
All righty, you guys. So when typically we get a family in the community, we want to help them. But how do we do that? So first things first is we assess the client situation. And by doing that, we can do a home visit. And with COVID, that's been very creative for us, but we have been able to still accommodate our families. We assess them by first seeing if they're pregnant or not, or did they seek good quality care while they're pregnant, and their postpartum care. Did they get that 6 weeks appointment, which we notice a lot of times our moms in our community are not getting. So we tune into that, as well as the child visits. We notice, sometimes they're missing these appointments, and they're missing their child's milestones. So that's something that we like to put a big emphasis on, as well as the whole family's mental health, emotionally, trauma building. We want to tune into what this family has been through, and we want to respect them and listen to them, as well as seeing where are they living? What is their housing situation? Is it severe? Is it low? Is it high? We want to give them that quality care so that we can fix that situation immediately, as well as nutritional needs while they are pregnant, or their children, or their whole family.
We also want to make sure that we are mapping out their strategy for outreach. So after we assess the situation and start to take all that information in, we then move forward with coming up with a plan. And this is very specific to the mom, to the family, because of course everyone responds to different things differently. We want to take all of what we gathered and put a lot of genuine effort into connecting with them, as we've been saying throughout the entire day today, being a human and really connecting with these moms and these families to make sure that we are getting the need, or we are matching them with the resources that best fits their needs, which is why we have so many community partners that we maintain really important relationships with, so that we can connect those people and bridge that gap between, people who don't have that access to resources, and people who are benefiting very well better off because they have access to those resources. Yes.
So in following through that process, it's important to tie the housing piece in together with this. So once we have mapped out how we can best help this family, how we can best help mom and baby, then they receive the resources to assist them in whatever issues they may have. That's looking like establishing those medical homes. That's where if we get a mom and we realize they've been sleeping in their car for the past 2 weeks, then we know, okay, maybe baby has missed those well-child visits. Maybe mom is not receiving the correct prenatal care. And so we're assessing those struggles, right? And then we're following those through our weekly check-ins. That's us calling or us hearing from the parents, the moms, the grandparents, aunts, cousins, whoever is involved in that support system, to know how can we support you. And Deja, you can go to the next slide. This is where reproductive justice comes in. We are advocating for our population. We are sitting in on these conversations. So how do we address these issues is sitting in on these conversations and continuously having them, because it hones in on why is it still an issue, right? Why we need the movement. And so when we were providing our informational support, our emotional support, our participants are able to receive birth doulas, postpartum doulas throughout their family planning period. They're also able to receive knowledge on how to be, or how to have agency over their bodies, how to make decisions for themselves, how and when to speak up during doctor's appointments and things like that. A lot of moms and a lot of families in the population that we serve aren't regularly attending doctor visits because, as shared previously earlier today, they don't feel heard. They feel like they're going somewhere, someone is taking their money. They have questions to ask, but they're afraid because they don't know if their knowledge is correct, or they feel as though they're being talked at and not being taught with, dealing with that, whatever situation that they may dealing with. A popular issue that we have, unfortunately, is with our teen parents. They're going to the doctor and they're trying to ask for information on, well, how can I better protect myself moving forward? I may want to have kids in the future. What should I be doing right now? And, we're talking about contraception, but what else should I be doing to keep my body healthy, to plan for my future? And that's where we come in as their advocates and as their case managers. And so moving on to the next slide, I'm going to allow Angelica to talk about all of these preventative measures that we take as case managers, advocates for families and our program participants.
And thank you so much, Brianna, for explaining why we do the things we do. And a little, just a taste of what the YWCA does on a daily basis. We provide preventable measures. And how do we do that? So first, we identify what is quality medical care. we have to educate our families. A lot of times, like Rihanna said, they want to speak up. They are afraid, but we have them, we're in the back, supporting them, letting them know, hey, what you're asking is correct. You can say it in this way. So keep going, and we encourage that. And if they don't know how to do that, we provide that services, like the doula program, advocates in our building, and mentors, as well as case managers. A lot of our families tend to suffer from emotional support due to trauma in their own childhood, their pregnancies, or as a parent. So we learn as throughout training to detect it early so that we can assist them, whether it's with treatment, therapy, or just talking and coping mechanisms. Another thing that we have noticed is within our programs, minorities struggle or have challenges with financial support. And everybody comes in between a life where they need help, and we want to offer that help. We do not want any family to be without the basic necessities, food, water, and shelter. So it's a beautiful thing that we can do these things by doing our monthly check-ins or weekly check-ins, whether that's within our family shelter, within our building. We also have a mental resource within our building, as well as our community partners to help with those stressful moments in life with our families. And our last piece that we try to really get out into the community is the physical overall health. We know that our communities are suffering from different things with health issues while you're pregnant, or if your baby is dealing with mortality rates or infant rates. We want to address it in this fast way possible by being there for them and providing extra support. And we noticed that food deserts is something that is very high in our population that we serve. So we try to provide food boxes, hot meals, as well as, sorry, my slide, as assistance on getting them WIC or food stamps. And as an incentive, we do gift cards.
So as we, oh, I'm so sorry, go ahead. Okay. So as we move forward with going off of what you said, trying to provide all of these resources to our families, things that we kind of talked about earlier, our community partners, these people that we reach out to and say, hey, I have this mom, hey, I have this family that could really benefit from the things that you're doing. And so the first one that we're going to talk about, I know you can't see this, but I'm still gonna hold it up. It is the Interactive Resource Center here in Greensboro, and we're sending all this information, I'm pretty sure. The Interactive Resource Center in Greensboro, they are open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And they offer a little bit more than just the typical, like, here's a flyer, here's a meal, here's some socks. They offer showers, they offer the ability to do laundry. This is literally, just from me looking at the flyer and looking on their website. So who knows what else they are able to offer. They offer job counseling. They do different life skill trainings. And so that's one of the very many resources, very important resources that go above and beyond to help not only just the people in the community, but the people that we get at the Y, our own families, our own moms that we're able to refer them to. And then I'll scoot it on over to you, Angelica.
All right, you guys. So of course, we know that it's a very big issue with housing in general in Greensboro, whether it's the housing list where you're on the waiting list, whether you are experiencing some issues with paying your rent, or you are being evicted. So we are noticing that our family shelter has been a very big need to the community, and we're so grateful that we have that. And we have the rapid housing program as well. So it's a great thing with COVID going on that has been kind of a demand, and we're trying to keep up with that demand. So with that being said, we have worked with our community partner with the coordinated entry line. And if anybody does not know that number, I will drop that in the chat in just a second and give details on how that process looks like. So typically what we tell our families, or if we get a phone call in the community, we tell moms that you need to call this number, leave your name, your number, and a way to contact you. We understand that homelessness is something that is very stressful on families. So we want to listen to them, get all their information, and let them know this is a process. So we have to be patient, but we stick with the families that call us and make sure they contact the coordinated entry line first, because they have to go through COVID testing and procedures before they come to our emergency family shelter. And I see we had a few questions in the chat. I will stop 1 second.
We'll save space for questions after because I want to be mindful of time. So did you have anything else to share on coordinated entry? If not, I will end off. Okay, great. So another resource that we partner with is a furniture bank called the Barnabas Networks here in Greensboro. And what that process looks like is, yes, we want to get families into safe housing, but we don't want families in housing just as themselves. They need some support there. You know, they're transitioning to workforce, educational, training. And so we want to be sure that as they are in that safe house, that they have support so that that house feels like a home. And so we're referring families to that community resource. And that resource, the Barnabas Network, is a huge help. It's a huge link to making sure that that family not only transition to safe housing, but that they remain there and that cycle ends right there. We're able to follow them and just check in and make sure that all things are well. They receive furniture, they receive household supplies, all things ranging from forks and spoons in your kitchen to bed frames and seating space for your living room, because we want to make sure that these families are living in safe spaces, that they're able to continue to grow once they transition out of our homeless shelter, out of our parenting programs. And so in closing on today and transition to the question piece, we want to be sure that we leave our contact information. We'll also drop our emails in the chat for communications outside of this space, but we do have a website. We do have a Facebook page that you can see what's going on over here. And we also have a main office line where you can contact and reach us directly for any questions, referrals, or partnerships. So thank you so much for this time, and we appreciate the opportunity for speaking with you all today.
Okay, thank you so much again, Brianna, Angelica, and Deja, for your presentation today, and sharing some of the amazing work that you all are doing and the resources that support reproductive health and well-being in Guilford County. And one of the things that I like to try to do when I listen to presentations is I try to see the themes within everything that we're discussing. And of course, it's hard to do when you're also trying to facilitate and let people into our virtual space. But what I was able to come up with was, and this is just from the threads from all the presentations, and then we'll open it up for Q&A, is that structural racism and the subsequent inequities like not having safe and affordable housing, it infringes upon our reproductive rights. And then structural barriers within our systems of care, that pose an additional threat to our reproductive health and well-being. However, from some of the presentations today, we've talked about approaches, and we can brainstorm further even other ideas of addressing this issue. But something that really resonated with me was the importance of having a collaborative approach that makes sure that we listen to the voices within our community and we include them in this process as well. So I wanted to say, one, thank you for all of the presentations. There was so much food for thought. And I'm sure that the presentations have generated lots of thoughts and questions from the audience. So now I would love to be able to open up the floor for a very robust discussion with our time remaining. So at this time, please, friends, feel free to unmute yourselves to ask a question. And again, you can also use the chat function to type in your question as well.
Just to start off, I see a question in the chat from, I believe it was Christina, yes. How many beds do we have at the YWCA? Well, we have 8 rooms. So within those 8 rooms, we're able to house 30 people. And currently we're serving 17 people total. Out of those 17 people, there's 6 families. So there's 6 adults and 11 children.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I believe there was another.
What other questions or comments do we have? Well, I can throw out a softball question. I teach, so I'm often prepared with questions to ask. But this is a question for all of our participants that served as presenters today. We talked about advocacy a lot as well, especially in our last presentation about being advocates for teen parents and parenting folks in our community. How can we advocate and support initiatives that support safe and affordable housing, whether we, are employed in the healthcare sphere, public health, or if we're just concerned citizens? What would be your suggestions of how we could advocate for those surrounding this topic?
I'll jump in and thank you for answering that question about the beds. I've appreciated everybody's information that we're sharing. It's so much need, and so it's so much services to offer out here. To answer your question about advocacy, I was thinking back to our webinar about political advocacy and just there's so many levels, like you said. So getting involved, being a registered voter first, because your representatives are going to listen to the people who are voting more so, but they should be listening to everybody. And so in addition to voting is going to speak at our local government meetings. So, and then you can do that via webinar, and then not only just city council and county commission, but in the commission, the boards and commission meetings as well are some locally places, and then certainly in Raleigh, there's still that opportunity there. But it's also helpful too, like you're saying, organize, partnership with one another, collaborate. And so taking more than one story, but a collection of stories. One of the things I felt like was so heart triggering in what was shared by Love and Natasha, that people who were here as immigrants and Africans feeling as if they were questioning what kind of rights did they have here. And that's so heartbreaking that was even a question. And so wanting to emphasize the importance of solidarity, the importance of Black and Brown and immigrant and refugee communities coming together. So being able to speak up together is important. I love the work that YWCA is doing to encourage people to speak up and ask questions. So those are some of the first ideas I have about that, to your question.
Thank you, Christina. Others? Either comments on that question or another question?
Yeah, I would say I think advocacy sometimes is with our dollars, right? And that we would, I know there's a farmer's market in Glenwood. I haven't been there yet this season, but like using my dollars to reinvest in a community that I believe in, that I believe has a lot of assets. And so I think sometimes our advocacy happens with where we will spend our money. Would we drive 2 extra miles, right, to put money into a community? It's a lot of refugee and immigrant community members in that area. And I know it's not far from UNCG. So some of you might be able to walk there, but I think sometimes advocacy happens just with where we're willing to put spending and build wealth back into communities.
Thank you. Something else that came to mind, I know, Love, in your presentation, you talked about the victim blaming that occurred, which was, again, maddening from my perspective, right? But it made me think of the question of not only advocacy and how that's important, but while we're advocating, how can we hold folks that need to be held accountable, like landlords? And this is for anyone in the group, but I'll give it the first softball to our panelists. What are some strategies for holding folks accountable?
I know from the standpoint, oh, that sucks. You can't see my actual, not the point. I know from the standpoint of the teen parenting programs here at the Y, a lot of what we focus on when we talk to teen moms about stigmas that they will often encounter and like how it makes them feel. We encourage them, because a lot of that comes from their own families, like people within their community. We encourage them to tell them, be very loud and proud about your identities, and don't allow other people to put those stigmas on you. Push back against them, welcome conversation about, kind of taboo topics like teen pregnancy, kind of normalizing it, making sure that you're, opening up conversations to where people won't have room to be rude, to say, disrespectful or inappropriate things. And so I think that's a really great way to start in those very small kind of perspectives of, this is my family and what they're saying about me, and then broadening it to, this is what the community is saying about me, and this is what the world is saying about me, and this is how I'm going to change it.
Thank you for that. Also, I was thinking too, if we're talking at first, we can't hold people accountable if we don't know our rights, right? And so that kind of emerged from the conversation too. You don't know you may not be able to advocate or hold people accountable if you don't even know what your own personal rights or your family rights are. So I appreciate the work that the Center for New North Carolinians is doing, as well as the YWCA, and educating folks on what their rights are so that they can hold people accountable and they can advocate for their health and well-being. Love, you wanted to make a comment?
Well, I wish Natasha was here. I know she had to leave. She had this great idea of what she hopes eventually CNNC would be able to do, which is around this whole education piece. Because I think she sees that's where that's missing. So one is education. And then the other thing is having folks or working with landlords or folks who are actually interested. So it's one thing when you think about the whole summit cone and all of that, what happened there with the landlords there. They're not, I doubt they were actually interested per se in, okay, I don't want to go too much in detail, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that in addition to education, the education piece is also seeking out stakeholders who are in places of authority, who are interested. I mean, we have the mayor who went all the way down to the refugee camps in sub-Saharan Africa last year with Natasha and the father who lost his 5 children, right? And having those people in the place of authority who can actually advocate and even hopefully make some landlords or some others accountable. I think the last thing I would say is education also about responsibility on behalf of the families themselves. Because that was one thing we discussed yesterday with Natasha is many families don't even know what they need to be doing. Replacing the battery in your fire alarm, for instance, that's not something you grew up with. Because I also wasn't born here. So that's not something that's natural. And that could save lives. And so just even realizing, okay, this is my responsibility and this is what in the US, at least in this context, is part of having safe housing. So I think both responsibilities and education to keep folks accountable is important.
Thank you. Those are some excellent points.
And I would like to say also that agree with Love. Those landlords are responsible to have safe housing, affordable housing, and they're responsible for making repairs on housing. And the city has the obligation to charge them when they continue to have substandard housing. And I think that this administration is doing a good job of saying, landlords, if you're going to get money from people to stay in your apartments, you have to keep them up to date. You have to have them safe and charge them for not doing that.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Marianne, for those comments.
Yeah, I was thinking some more too, and I'm looking forward to more questions, but I put in a chat a link to human rights. And so the United Nations has declared wherever country you are, these are human rights. And so holding people accountable to that. And so that also can look like organizing voices to speak out. So in addition to just speaking from the floor, I mean, putting together your editorial to declare this is a problem for us here, and having people together, the voices of the community, that is another idea to help.
Thank you, Christina. I know, Crystal, you've unmuted yourself a couple of times.
Yeah, it's fine. It's been a good conversation. I appreciate Mary's comments about that accountability aspect, because it really there needs to be someone. And I fear that now that we're in a incredibly aggressive seller's market, that this housing crisis is going to only exacerbate the homelessness and getting into a house. There are people who actually are not struggling with financial means, having a hard time finding a home. So can you imagine? And they're going 30,000 above asking. I'm sure Dr. Sills and others who are in housing can, in terms of the real estate aspect, can attest to that. So how might we prepare in the next influx of the market to protect people? Because 30,000 above asking price, and then you have the the landlords that are also inflating their rental prices. So we haven't really quite thought through that, of how we can protect the market from creating harm to people. But it's just devastating, because there's so many different factors that are happening, and some worse in some points than others. But this has been a great conversation. And I really do hope we create moments of accountability. I'm glad Mary mentioned that, because I would love to know what exactly the city can do more of to really incentivize. Unfortunately, I hate to use the word incentivize, but you should morally have a responsibility, but to incentivize our landlords to do the right thing for people that they're housing.
Either incentivize or so, you can use rewards, or you can use the opposite of that, right? So we can positively give you rewards and incentivize you, or I think like what Marianne was saying, we can penalize you, right? So, I mean, I know that this is just part one of multiple conversations on this issue of not only reproductive justice, but really connecting it to housing, and ensuring that everyone, like, housing is a right too. Safe and affordable housing is a human right as well. Any other questions or comments from those in the audience today? This has really been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed facilitating it. Oh, I did have one more question from our panelist. I would like to hear from all that are still present with us. What gives you all hope? And this maybe could round us out for the evening or afternoon. Laura, what gives you hope?
So we just opened a med center for women that's across from the police station on 3rd Street, so near other social services. And there was a lot of community voice that went into that, the design and everything. It'll have a food mart within it. It'll a lot of wraparound services, physical therapy, all kinds of things. And I think that gives me hope that that big institutions like a healthcare institution, they're beginning to really lift up the voice of the community and respond. And so we'll figure out the housing piece and how we don't break laws, and could actually do something like design some interventions. But it does help me see, and to Crystal's point about like the housing market is so crazy right now, but it gives me hope to think there are ways that big institutions could use their power to lift up what people really want, the community voice. So that gives me hope, and I see it happening in small pockets around our city.
Thank you. Christina, quickly, what gives you hope?
this public conversation about the factors, structural factors. So more conversations and people getting involved in the conversation that is not about victim blaming, but we want to look at the entire situation from a public health perspective. So that's giving me hope that the people here that we're having more, whether they're students or community leaders and mothers themselves, wanting to say it's not about the shame of me as an individual, but what else is happening systemically that we can partner and work on.
Thank you so much. Love, what gives you hope?
Oh, wow. I would say folks like the Phillips apartments folks who are actually, who care. I mean, these are people who are living, they give a whole apartment complex just to CNNC without any rent. They don't have to pay rent or anything, so they can actually make a difference in the community. So these are folks families who care, agencies who care, folks are actually making a difference, even losing money just to make a difference. I mean, those people, I guess, give a little bit of a light where there seems to be darkness. So I think that's what gives me hope.
Thank you. Brianna?
What gives me hope? A loaded question. I was sitting here listening to you all and collecting like, yes, that too, yes, that too. I really want to hone in on what Christina mentioned. Conversations like this, they're so important. If you look at the diversity with who spoke today, we got representative from the health perspective, the community, the groundworks perspective, and it's important for these movements to have all of those perspectives because this network, it reaches out so far, and that's how we can reach the populations that need it best. We gotta, these conversations can't all happen at the top. It can't all happen with the main decision makers because then they're not going to really impact the folks that really need these services. So continuing to open up these conversations to those that are interested, for one. And then we who are knowledgeable to keep learning, to be open to these new questions and new answers that are coming along that we aren't knowledgeable about, so that we can share it and pass it along. That's the only way that we're gonna see better. That's the only way we're gonna move forward in this movement.
Thank you, Brianna. And then Angelica and Deja, what gives you all hope?
I would have to say actually seeing our moms and babies benefit from the work we do. So you guys know that we're doing some phenomenal things. You guys are doing some phenomenal things. You kind of have to say a piece of gratefulness every morning because you're helping so many families on different levels. So I can say these babies give me hope for change and more things to come for them. So yeah, that's my little spiel.
Thank you. Deja?
I kind of want to just say retweet to like everything that everyone's been saying. I think the biggest kind of thing that gives me hope is when we're in these conversations, everyone's face when they like learn something new or like, oh my God, I didn't know about that resource. I'm going to take it. And like you were saying earlier, Brianna, like take it to the people that I know, take it to my families, the people that I work with, and spread that information. I think that initial just like, oh, that's so cool. Or I didn't know that. I'm going to take this information. I think that's like the best part. We see how that information affects each other on this level, and then how it trickles down into all the communities that we all work with. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you all for indulging me in that question. What gives you all hope? Well, friends, we can call each other friends now. We have now come to the end of today's Housing Hangout. How is everyone feeling? What have you learned? What would you like to learn more about? What are you hopeful for? We hope to see you at our next Housing Hangout, which is on July the 2nd. And stay tuned for more events hosted by Voices for Reproductive Justice. I want to thank you all for your participation and special thank you to our amazing guest presenters. Goodbye, everyone, and have a very safe and restorative weekend.
Thank you. Bye-bye.